Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video that is going to be on the difference between AutoCAD, the software, and AutoCAD, the web app. Okay, so we're going to be drawing my 3D1 assignment, and we're going to be drawing the views of those 3D1 assignment. But we're going to show you how to do it in both, okay, because there is a little bit of a difference between the two, okay. So what we're drawing is actually going to be all four of these things. These three here are what's called the orthographic views, okay, so this is important. This is new for my students. Orthographic views are the different views of a 3D model, okay. So if this is the 3D model, this is the block. This would be the front face over here. This would be the right face, and this and this would be the top face, okay, because that's what's facing up. This side right here would also be the right side, okay, because that's a notch that's pulled out of there or cut out of there, and that side faces this same direction, which would be the right side, okay. So the first thing we're going to do is draw these views. All right, so I'm going to do that in AutoCAD first. First thing you're going to do is you're going to draw over, and you can see that this is going to be 3 inches by 1 inch. I always draw the front view first. So we're going to go 3 over. Now this part of it's not very different when it comes to the web app and the AutoCAD software, but there's a couple differences, so we'll talk about that in a second. All right, so we're going to go 3 1 3 1. Okay, now you'll notice that there is a notch cut out. That notch is 1/2 inch deep. In order to find out how wide the notch is or how far in before the notch starts, I'm going to follow that up to my top view. It's very important to note that when you're doing orthographic views, they have to line up bottom to bottom, top to top, left to left, right to right. Because as you have a 3D model and you're spinning that 3D model, it doesn't change how wide it is or how tall it is or how deep it is. Okay, it has to stay exactly the same because the model's not getting any bigger or smaller just because you're looking at a different side of it. Okay, so looking at these numbers up here, I know that I could go 2 inches over before the notch. These two lines right here are lining up with these corners right here. Okay, they're hard lines, hard corners, because looking above, looking from the top, this is what you would see. Even though this area is lower, it's cut in, it still is going to look flat because we're drawing a 2D view and not a 3D view. Okay, so looking at this number, it's about 1/2 inch over. And then you can obviously do some math and say, well, if this is 3 and that's 2 and that's 1/2, that makes the width of the notch also 1/2. Okay, so you can do this a couple different ways. We could now actually, here's our first difference between the software and the web app. When you're using the software, if you single click and drag, that's your green and blue selection boxes. If you click and hold, that's what gives you your more specific selection box. Okay, that is useful in some situations, but not so useful for me and for what we do. But there are times like when you're trying to select like specific lines that you just want to get a little area, you can do that. Okay, on the web app, when I go to do a selection, I have to click and hold to get those boxes, and there is no way of getting that more specific selection box. Okay, all right, so back to AutoCAD. We could go like this and do 3 1 0.5, whoops, 0.5 going down, 0.5 over, 0.5 up, and then 2, and then 1. Or if we had what I had before, you could do offsets. Okay, so here's another difference with the offset tool. In the software, when you use offset, you have to type your distance first, 0.5, enter, and then you can offset as many as you want. Now you know what, there's a difference with trim too, so we're going to talk about that. But let's go to the web app first. In here, when you're doing offset, okay, so let's draw the same thing. And anybody who's watched my web app videos recently knows that when you're doing offset, you have to click the line first, then move your cursor in the correct direction, type your number, and then hit enter. But you can't do multiple ones within that selection. Okay, you have to go back in, click again, move over to the left, 0.5 enter, and then top, coming down, 0.5 enter. All right, So now we're going to work into trimming. All right, if I go into trim, anything that I click is going to get trimmed out. Okay, that is similar on the AutoCAD software. If I'm in trim, starting with the 2021 software, anything I click will get trimmed off. If you're on 2020 or older, you actually have to do, in order to get what's called a quick trim, you have to do trim and then hit enter, and then you can start clicking things off that you don't want. Okay, so that's the only differences. If you wanted to use cutting edges, so let's do this as an example. Let's say I had this cross like this and I was in 2020 or older. If I'm in trim, I could select the line that I want to cut things off at, which would be this line. I'd hit enter and then I would click what I want to cut off. Okay, but they've pretty much kind of phased that out a little bit, and they've made that a little bit more into the background, where now on 2021 you have to click on cutting edges, you click the edge that you want to cut at, enter, and then what you want to trim off. Okay, in the web app, as far as trimming goes with cutting edges, I don't know, let's see, trim, yeah, it looks like it works the same way as 2021 does. So you would click on cutting edges, you would click the edge that you want to cut something off, enter, and then what you want to cut off. All right, so we've got the first one. I'm going to move this out of the way. We're going to do that in a second. Now we're looking at the other view. Okay, we're looking at the top view, and like I said, they have to line up. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a left side and I'm going to draw a right side, and these are pretty much dummy lines. They're either going to get trimmed or erased. Okay, also specific to my drawings, I tell my students that, let's see, where is it, that there's always a 1-inch space between the orthographic views. Okay, again, these are called orthographic views. This is the front, that's the right, that's the top. Always put a 1-inch space between them. Okay, so if I go to do offset and I do 1 inch, all right, now you'll notice that it only does that piece, but I could extend that, or manually, or use the extend tool. That's up to you. And now I'm looking at the depth of the top. This is the depth of the 3D model. How far back does it go? That's 1.5 inches. Okay, so using the offset in the software, I'm going to type my number first, 1.5. We're going to go back, and now I'm going to trim the extra on the top and bottom. All right, so we have this. And then the next thing would be to take this notch, okay, the left side of the notch. You can either click and draw that through and then trim the extra off, or you can slide up on the green line, which is F10, by the way. Make sure that's turned on. That's called polar. Okay, you can slide and click at the intersection and then draw across, and then you don't have to trim anything. That I leave up to you. Okay, whatever you want to decide. Going back to the web app, same idea here. Offset. Click on the line you want to offset. Go in your direction, 1 inch. We're going to draw some sidelines, line, and we'll go like this. We'll extend, trim, and then offset again. 1.5. Oh, I'm sorry. See, that almost messed up. Click the line first in the web app, then 1.5. And then trim and trim. All right, and the same thing applies here. You can slide up, click and draw, or you can just draw and then trim after. That's up to you. All right, right view. The right side here, if you're looking at the model, is just a rectangle. Okay, it's longer than it is tall, but there is something else going on back there, which we've got to talk about in a second. In this view, this front view, we understand the entire model. You can see the notch, and when you extrude it, which is the name for making something 3D, giving it depth, that's the name of the tool, is what I meant to say. You can see the notches there, and that it goes all the way through the model. Okay, so there's nothing in this view that you can't see from this view. Okay, you understand everything. Same thing with the top. Looking down at the top, there's nothing that I don't understand. I can see in the top view that there is something going on with these two hard lines, so that's why I would, let's see if I can get this to pan. There we go. That's why I would be looking at these and following them down and saying, oh, okay, there's a notch there. That's why this is like this. Okay. All right, so going back to the software, we're going to do an offset of 1. Type your distance first, then hit enter. and then the depth of it is 1.5. So I'm going to hit escape. Spacebar brings me back into offset 1.5, and I'll go 1.5 over, and then I'm just going to connect the top and bottom, or you could draw from the bottom just like we were doing before. Okay, so you get something like this. Going back to the web app, you can see that I would still do offset here. Click the line, move to the right, whoops, 1, and then click the line again and go 1.5, line, connect, connect. Okay, now we're not done yet though, because like I said, we have to describe what's happening behind this face. So if there's something going on, you have to describe it in this view. Otherwise, you would think that if I was to cover those other views, that this is just, if this is the right side, this is just the right side of a box that's going back, and we don't know about any notches or anything like that. Okay, but there is, so here's how you do that. In the web app, what you're going to do is you're going to go on this notch, how deep the notch goes, and bring that across and click and draw. Okay, so that's going to describe that there's something else going on back there, but this line needs to be a hidden line. All right, so let's see if we can actually change the properties of this line. I never really had success with this. Oh, see, now they're giving me options in here. So a couple weeks ago when I was trying this, and you know, maybe you'll see this as well out there, they didn't give me options for line types to change, but you would want to change this to a hidden line, okay, which is basically just going to be a dotted line that goes across and shows you where that notch is, where the depth of it is. Okay, so this one is now done. I would throw dimensions on it, and then I would move on to the 3D part. Going back to this one, same idea. Take a line at the depth. Okay, how deep is the actual notch? Bring that across, and then click and click. Now it's a little bit different for the line type in here. You have to select, so first of all I'm going to go back to my 2D tools. You can see I'm on a different set of toolbars here. I'm going to hit the gear down here. I'm going to go to drafting and annotation. Let that load for a second. Let's make sure I click that correctly. There we go. Alright, so you want to select the line, you want to go to line type, and then if you already have them loaded, you can change to the line type that you want. But if you don't have it loaded yet, like you've never used a hidden line, never used a center line before, you want to click on this first, go to other, you want to go to load, and then you want to search down here, just scroll down, and I would add in the hidden, this one, hidden 2.5x. Okay, now there are 3 different hidden ones. Some of them are bigger, some of them are smaller. The hidden 2, the 0.5x one, is just the one that works best for this drawing for us. Okay, so I'm going to click on that, I'll hit OK, and I'll hit OK. Now that it's preloaded, I can select my line, and whoops, I can go in there and put a hidden 2 on there. Okay, and that's it. Alright, so that's it for the 2D part. We're now going to work on the 3D part. Alright, so I'm going to get rid of this stuff in this drawing. Let's actually do the web app first. That's a little bit easier. It's not possible to do 3D in this web app. Okay, so it's not true 3D. But what you can do is you can make it look 3D. All right. So if I know the sizes of all these lines here, what I can do is I can change down here where it says, let's see, is it object track? No. Snap? No. Ortho. It's polar. Okay. And you want to change your increment to 30. All right. So what that's going to do is it's going to draw lines at 30 degrees. So if I go on here and I go at this green line, it's going to give me a line every 30 degrees. Okay. If I go on the first 30, which is about 150 degrees, I can do 3 enter. And then I can go straight up 1. I can go back 3 enter and down. Again, this is not a true 3D model. We can't spin this around and fill it in with materials and textures and solids and things like that. But we can make it look like it's 3D. So now I'm going to take this and I'm going to go this way, and I'll go 1.5, and I'll go down 1, and I'll come across here, and then I'll go back this way 3, and then close. Okay, so we're getting there. We're pretty close. We just got to cut the notch out. As far as the notch goes, you also will not be able to use offset, although let's see how that looks if we do use offset. See how it'll offset up and it won't offset back, because there's no such thing as back in this 2D version of the software. Okay, there is no depth. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to actually have to take a line and slide back 0.5, or you can draw back 0.5 and then erase the line when you're done. and then draw across. And then we can do the same thing again. Slide back. Let's see if we can zoom in a little bit and do this. So now if it doesn't let you slide on that green line, just click and draw 0.5. But remember that that line's there, and then you have to erase it. Okay, so there's another line right there. Okay. Now taking the line tool again, I'm going to go down 0.5. I'm going to come over 0.5, and I'm going to go up 0.5. And then this part would just get trimmed. Okay, so with this. Now, looking at this again, you can see that I have to bring this line down, and I have to bring this inside corner across. So the inside corner across is pretty easy because you're just connecting from here. Technically that edge goes all the way back this way, but we can just click there because this line here is already there, and it would look the same anyways. And then the last thing would be to take this line and bring it straight down, and that is your 3D 2D model. Okay, so that part's done. Alright, so back to the software. Software is real 3D. Okay, so what the first thing I want to do is I want to draw my front face. I'll do that really fast. I shouldn't have erased that before, but that's okay. Go get a cup of coffee or something while I'm doing this. Oh wait, I'm already done. Alright, so now here's the first problem. I drew this front face, but I drew it on the top, which is no good because when I go to my 3D view, it's going to be laying on its back, and I don't want it to extrude up. I want to extrude it back. Okay, so there's two different ways to fix this. Now I can, select this stuff, delete it, and redraw it again on what would be the front side, or I can select it, do Control C for copy, delete, and then change this to front and do Control V and click. Okay, Control V is paste. So now it's on the front. But before I go any further, it's important to notice or talk about how this changing from top to front to right to left, whatever, is way different than changing this to say front or top or whatever. This is only the side that you're looking at. Okay, if I want to look at the front, I can change this to look at the front. Or if I want to look at the right, I can look at the right. Okay, but you'll notice there's no grid here, and no grid means no draw, which means you can't draw on that side. Okay, you can draw laterally, but you can't draw any other direction. Okay, so this is only for viewing the model from different sides. This is for actually drawing on different sides. You see the grid. I'm on the top. I'm now looking down at what I drew before. If I change that to front, I can actually draw on the front side, and that's why there's a grid. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do here is we're going to reset our view. You have to do this every time you're doing a 3D model. You draw the side that you want to draw. If I want to draw the front, I'm drawing it on the front. If I wanted to draw the right, I would draw that on the right. But I always have to go back to top. Alright, so now I'm looking down at it. There's a tool called Orbit. That tool, if I click and hold, allows me to orbit around my, it's still 2D, but my 3D model. Okay. I can also do that by holding Shift on the keyboard and clicking down on the scroller on the mouse. Clicking and holding that down allows you to see the same little icon, and you can orbit around. Okay, so now two things to do here. We want to show, I'm going to make a copy of this. We want to show the difference between joining something and not joining something. You have to join it. Okay, that's the way 3D models work. Joining this, so if I select all this stuff and type join, it's going to put those lines together for me and make one polyline. Okay, now there was a third way we could have done this. We could, instead of using a line, use a polyline and draw that whole shape, and it would already be a polyline. But the problem with that is that you wouldn't be able to offset and trim and do all of that good stuff if it was a polyline. So this one is easy enough where we probably could have done it that way, but in other models, really starting with the very next one that I'm going to do, it won't work. Okay, you'd have to explode it, pull it apart, offset, do your trims, and then join it back together again. So it would actually be an added step, which we don't want to do. Okay, so I joined this. You'll see that if I hit F2, I'm going to bring up my past here. It's going to show up here that 8 objects were converted to one polyline. Okay, so there were 8 lines here. Make sure there are 8. If it says 8 to 1 and there are not 8 lines here, that's no good. If it says 8 to 2 and it's going to 2 things rather than one polyline, that's no good. Or if it's 10 to 2 or 10 to 3 or 10 to 5, anything like that would be no good. That would mean that there's an extra line somewhere, or that there's like a corner that's not perfectly touching. Okay, it could be too far or too short. Okay, but yeah, okay, so that's joined together. This one is not. When I go to do my 3D part, I'm going to change my tools again. I'm going to go to 3D Basics because that's what we use in class. It's the easiest way to understand 3D. If you go to 3D modeling, it gets a lot more complicated up there. There's a lot of different stuff, okay? So it's a little bit easier in the beginning to just be on 3D Basics. I'm going to use the extrude tool. Now, like any tool in AutoCAD, if I just put my cursor over top of this and I just leave it there for a couple seconds, it'll give me an idea of what extrude does, and give you a little picture and an explanation. Okay, so you can read that if you'd like. But basically, when I select my model and I do extrude, it's going to want to know now which direction do I want to go and how far do I want to go. If I put my cursor in the back direction and do 1.5 enter, sorry, I messed that up already. If I extrude, if I do 1. This actually is different for different people, and I've never really figured out why. Sometimes you have to put your cursor back and it's asking like how far back, and you would do 1.5. Or the other way, it wants to know if it's a positive or negative number. If I did a positive 1.5, it's going to come forward 1.5. If I do a negative 1.5, it's going to go back 1.5. That's the way that mine is working right now, but I got to be honest with you, sometimes when I'm at school and I'm on 2019 version, it'll do the opposite. Okay, so whatever way it is, figure out what it's doing and just do one or the other one. Okay, so I want to go back 1.5, although it doesn't matter if it was forward in this case, but I always like to extrude back. That would be a negative 1.5 for this instance. Okay, so that 3D model there is done. I can change this from 2D wireframe. By the way, you're always on 2D wireframe when you're working on your model, but if you want to look at what it looks like, you can go to conceptual and you can orbit around and you can see how that looks when it has something filled in. If you wanted to put materials and textures and lighting, which we're not going to get to for a while, you would do realistic. Okay, so now I'm going to erase this one. This one's fine. Although if you're one of my students, always reset your view back to top and always go back to the bottom right after you're orbiting, because this on hidden is the way that we would print it. Okay, but if you orbit, it changes that view, it changes the angle, and we don't want to print it that way. We want to make sure that we always go back to top and then we go to the bottom right. Okay, that's our 3D view. That's the way we print them. Now for this one, I did not join this one. This was the second example. If I extrude all of these lines, you're going to get, and let's go back to 2D wireframe for a second, you're going to get all these different fence looking lines, which means that it's not a solid. Each surface is a solid itself. It's just a 2D surface, and I could go to hidden and show you that I can look through the model. Okay, and it's probably even easier to see it on conceptual. I can see through it, but it's not a solid. It just has surfaces. Okay, so that's why you got to join it first before you extrude, because you'll get the actual 3D model, the solid. All right, so listen, that's pretty much it for this video. I appreciate you guys watching. This was the difference between the web app and the AutoCAD software, and even AutoCAD software 2021 versus 20 and older. Okay, but we're just showing you some basic 3D stuff and some basic orthographic views, which are 2D drawings, 2D faces of a 3D model. All right, so I appreciate you guys watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. Later.